Is it time to fire Paul Mainieri after one season in South Carolina? I tell you why that is the dumbest thing South Carolina can do. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. And before we get started, I want to say thank you for joining us on this current episode and for everyone that joins us each and every episode and making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode brought to you by our friends at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. It's as simple as that. You guys know I love it. All about it. Maybe there's an event this weekend, not the spring games, that's free, but several baseball games, which is the topic of today's show, ironically enough. The specific topic we're going to talk about is this. Social media is primarily where you're hearing a lot of the frustrations. I'm sure you're hearing it from fans everywhere, though, and how bad this South Carolina baseball team has been this year. And a lot of people have posed the question, some more, let's say, calmly than others. Should this be the only year Paul Mainieri is your head baseball coach in South Carolina? It would be a one and done, but the question is, should they fire him after 1 year because of how bad this season has been? I'm not going to keep you waiting on this one. The answer is no. The answer is no for a number of reasons, but the idea that fans could be this impatient and this angry about baseball tells me a couple things. One, of course, they're upset because of how bad the baseball team has been, and also how frustrated they are because you kind of thought, you were on the cusp of some things. You have hosted regionals in the last 3 to 5 years. You've gone to the postseason. And last year, you kind of thought at the very least, with Petrie returning especially, you were going to have a lot of pieces in place going into this year that would still be a competitive team. That's not been the case. But blaming Paul Mainieri, who has won a national championship, who has one of the winningest coaches in college baseball history, is, in my opinion, one of the, I'm trying to find a word that's not dumb, because the word to me is that. But blaming him and solely him is one of the more misguided takes I've seen lately when it comes to college sports. And there's been a ton. Obviously, we know all the stuff with Nico, Alieva, all sorts of stuff going around that, NIL, the house settlement, portal. The idea that Paul Mainieri should be one and done because of how bad his first season in Columbia has been is ridiculous. And I'll tell you for a number of reasons. One, he's a national championship winning coach. He's one of two on the staff, him and Don Staley. They at least know what it takes to get there. I understand the frustration of how bad this season has been, but I will just tell you right off the bat, the biggest reason I would say this does not fall on Paul Mainieri didn't give up 40 runs to Texas A&M this weekend. Paul Mainieri didn't give up 2 walk-off home runs. Paul Mainieri also didn't give up 2 grand slams in the bottom of the 9th inning alone in Game 3 of that game against A&M. Now, you could sit there and say, yeah, but he's the one making the decisions on who goes on the bump, who is in the lineup every day, all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to tell you some stats. And this is not me pointing the finger and blaming someone else or making the players the scapegoat or anything like that. But again, there's only so many things Paul Mainieri can do with a roster and a pitching staff especially that has performed like this. Okay? Right now, you got 4 players on the team hitting over 300. Nathan Hall, Ethan Petrie, Bo Hollins, Jordan Carrion. Now, you knew that Petrie was going to be the one that he was definitely going to be included in that group from the start of the season. He's the only player with double-digit home runs. He's the only player on the team with over 5 home runs all season as well. Listen, I don't want to only look at this past weekend against A&M, but I think it is a massive, massive, perfect example as to why the idea that you're blaming the head coach solely for all of the problems on this team is foolish, to say the least. Mainieri they go to College Station, and you're looking at a team that was one of the worst teams in the country in the first half of the year. They were arguably the worst team besides Missouri in the SEC going into the first half or after the first half of the season. Now, granted, they were the preseason number one team in the country. They were an eyelash short of winning a national championship a year ago, but they have struggled all year long. Now they are on a bit of a roll going into the series against Carolina. They've won 4 out of 5. They won the series against Tennessee, and their bats are finally coming alive. But going into College Station and losing the first game in extra innings, and you're like, man, that sucks. Like, I mean, it's such a great game. You battled. You like none of the kids gave up. You fought the entire game. You pushed it to extra innings. You like all of those things are positives, especially from the lineup. But your starting pitcher went out and gave up 6 earned runs in 3 innings. Hard to beat anybody with an ERA of 18. Hard to beat anybody when you give up 6 runs in the first 3 innings, because now you're most likely having to climb back into the game every single time that happens. And that happens a lot with this team. It happens a lot with this pitching staff. And you look at the offense, and you could say, well, listen, there's not a ton of pop. Outside of Petrie, there's not a lot of, not a lot of guys like hitting for extra base hits. Not a lot of guys that are like anywhere close to being high-level draft picks besides him. Like, he is the star of this team. I think they've done really well with several of the players. I love the Kazmir kid. I think he's been fantastic all season long. I know he only has 4 home runs. That's not really what he does. But he has been, I think, a fantastic pickup in the portal. That's also a guy that came over after Mainieri was hired to South Carolina. This is a situation when you're looking again at the lineup. You currently rank in the SEC 13th in the SEC in batting average. You're hitting 275 collectively as a team. That's honestly not that bad, in my opinion. And it's tied. It's tied for 13th with Kentucky and A&M also hitting 275. Vanderbilt is in dead last, and they're hitting 271. The difference between you and Vanderbilt, you already know the answer. I mean, Vanderbilt's a ranked team. You played the same amount of games. How does Vanderbilt, how are they last in the conference in hitting, yet they're still a top 20 team? How does that happen? Pitching. Like, you knew going into the season what the power numbers were going to be. Not ideal. 41 total home runs as a team. You're hitting a slugging percentage of 436, which is one like on the lower end in the conference as well. But you knew all that coming into it. You were going to have to scratch across runs. And either way, you're also looking at a lineup that still looks better, in my opinion, than it did in the infield, especially from second to third base, than it did a year ago. You were averaging, I think, 31% or just over 31% of the bats of last year's infield outside of Petrie. Like 31% of those bats were strikeouts. Not great. Not great. But you had to know that you were at least going to get somewhat better there. And I think you have for the most part. Pitching is the problem. And again, I understand the frustrations and just speaks again to how passionate the fan base is and how frustrated they are, because everyone knows it's more frustrating for South Carolina to be this mediocre or bad at baseball than other sports because of the history of this program. This was one of the best programs in the country. The other part of that, too, is not only was it one of the best programs in the country, you won back-to-back national titles at the start of the 2010s, but it also was constantly in contention to get to Omaha, to host regionals, to host a super regional. Like I remember those days, Landon Powell and some of these other years where you had like elite players like from the 2000s and all that kind of stuff when I was coming up, like a phenomenal baseball program and one of the best in the conference, if not the country. That's not where you are right now. And I get the frustration. But no program is going to be elite just by wishing they were, because they used to be really good. You know what those teams in the past did? Or you know what? Here's a better way to put it. You know what they didn't do? They didn't rank second to last in the SEC with a 5.62 ERA. They didn't do that, right? Like you just finished off a game against the Citadel and you had your 4th shutout of the year. That's actually one of the best numbers of any team in the SEC. It ranks second. It's in a tie for second of every single team in the SEC. But you're 15th in ERA. You're 15th in ERA. You're second to last in earned runs, total earned runs with 196. You're third to last in total walks with 168. Like, it's been bad all year, and it's been bad specifically on one side of all of this, and that has been on the mound. And I go back to the Texas A&M thing, and I will say this again. I understand the frustration. I fully get the frustration. But Paul Mainieri didn't give up 40 runs to Texas A&M. And when you look at the way the season started in SEC play, I didn't think it was going to be a microcosm or a sign of things to come, but you lost the first series to Oklahoma at home because of a blown lead in the ninth inning and allowing them to come back and win in extras and beat you. That's a ranked team. That's how you lost that series. Now, you look at where you are against A&M, most recent SEC series. You lose the first game on a walk-off after you scratch back, all that kind of stuff. Then you go to game 2. Pretty important game. Don't want to have another series loss. Again, this is a team that had their backs against the wall like for the last several weeks going into the second half of the season. A&M was looking at becoming one of the first teams or the first team in college baseball since 1997 to start the year at number 1 and then miss the postseason entirely. That's how bad they were playing. You had a chance to go here and at least get a win. Go to game 2, you lose 17-0. So through 2 games, your pitching staff has given up 25 runs. Then you go to Sunday. And Sunday is the biggest reason that I think should be the most obvious reason as to why clearly Mainieri isn't the one at fault. You go into a game 3 that is almost meaningless. Like it almost feels meaningless at this point because of how badly you got beat the first 2 games. And credit the bats and the pitching staff through the first 7 innings of how great of a job they did to put you in this position. But you take a 12-3 lead into the 7th inning. You then go to the 9th. You have a 12-7 lead because, of course, you give up several runs in the final 3 frames. You go to the 9th inning. You're up 12-7. You give up a grand slam to make it 12-11. And in one of the most inexplicable things I have ever seen, then you get walked off by another grand slam. You gave up 2 grand slams in the 9th inning, and you lose 15-12. 2 of the 3 losses were in the final inning on walk-off home runs. The other loss, obviously, is a 17-0 just splattering, right? Like, you have given up 51 home runs as a staff this year. 51. It's by far the most in the SEC. It's the only team in the SEC that's allowed more than 50. How do you do that and blame the coach? And this is probably a bad example and not the best. It feels a little bit more prisoner of the moment than it should. But you watch the game against the Citadel tonight. You get out hit. I think they had 7 total hits. South Carolina had 6. But you only walked 3 or 4 total players. I think it was 3 or 4 batters. You don't allow an earned run. Every time you had somebody get on base, your pitchers were able to either get in the ground into a double play or get out of the inning without any sort of, but besides maybe I think in like the 7th or 8th, there wasn't a lot of even like flirting with runs. They were great. They were covered great. Even if they started off an inning with, in a hole. That's what you're supposed to do. You only scratched 4 runs across on the Citadel. It's a different ball game when you give up 0. And that's unbelievably obvious. I know that. But you saw it tonight, what this can look like if the pitching staff is decent. That's how it should look. So to say that Paul Mainieri should be fired because of, I mean, I know it's a collective thing and it's not just the A&M stuff, but there's no better example of it. Look at your first series in SEC play and look at your most recent one. The same thing that bit you in the first series has bit you in this one. And listen, you got about 18 games left. Ole Miss comes to town this weekend. They were a top 10 team last week. I'm not sure. I think they probably still are because they lost to Tennessee 2-1 in that series. But I mean, what happened against an A&M team that's been bad by all means? That's not on Paul Mainieri. You guys know that, and I know it. And so, again, the idea that you should fire one of 2 national championship coaches you have on staff for a momentary fix, at the very least, you let him recruit, get some guys in there, look at the portal, and figure out a way to at least get his guys out there on that field. And that's it. All right, that is all for this episode. It was a quick one. We are going to have another one your way because the portal opens. I'm recording this Tuesday night. The portal opens Wednesday morning. That being said, Before we go, I do want to give a quick shout out to one of our good friends, and that is our friends at the Game Time app. You heard me talk about them earlier. You know we're going to talk about them again. It's the spring. There's tons of stuff to be doing right now. We got baseball. Obviously, basketball's over, but NBA playoff basketball is still alive, and there is no better way to get out and about than with our friends of the Game Time app. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Game Time. Priority of the last-minute deal. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all the above. The all-in pricing means there's also no surprise fees at checkout, and what you see is what you get. You simply cannot beat it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also, want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Happens to me all the time. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Listen, when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I can budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off the first year.